Let's pray again. Baba siyakubonga kusihlwa umsosenzile wona uba unathi ke manje siyazi sikutholela usilindele. Tell us, Lord, what you have planned to tell us this evening. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you. Evil can be used by historical processes to jerk us into doing good. Ellen White has a statement that I will not quote verbatim. She says, the work that the church has neglected to do in times of peace, it will have to do under the most forbidding circumstances. And I'm beginning to sense that we are either at that time or on the verge of that time. Because we are laden with consequences of neglect. There's a background to our little talk for this evening, Save the Boy Child. I do need to say that because we have read the Bible as a book that seemed to have come from another world, rather than a book that addresses the real material world, we often superimpose a spirituality on it which it does not need. We cover everything in the Bible as though it is spirituality, when some of it is rooted in real material history. And so we then misapply it or underapply it or use an application of the Bible that does not fix real problems. The Israelites are here. They came into Egypt in chapter 1 of Exodus because of hunger in their homeland. Jacob moves his family of 12 young men plus their offspring to North Africa. They came from East Africa. Historically, East Africa is the area that we now call Arabia, the Middle East. Until 1914, there was no such term as the Middle East. It was created by journalists who were covering the events of the First World War. And that term tended to separate Africa from the rest of the world, to which we all belong, the Afro-Asian world. Some of you will know Hebrews were Asians. They were not Europeans. Frankly, there are no Europeans in the Old Testament. They appear in the biblical religion during the intertestamental time. And that's why you start hearing in the book of Acts Greek widows complaining about the fact that in the distribution of food, they are neglected. So when we read the Old Testament, you need to know that we are reading a text that's close to our history. Which is one of the reasons why it was easy for African people to embrace the Christian faith, because they found similarities between the culture of the Jews, the Hebrews, and the culture of African people. First of all, we all believe in a single God. We're monotheists. We believe in things like polygamy, circumcision, respect for adults, respect for authority. In fact, the 10 commandments, if you study them carefully, are African commandments. The center is the family in the keeping of the Sabbath. The family. In the Bible, the Sabbath was family-based. Sabbath keeping was family context. And these are one of the things we have lost. The Sabbath is not located in the temple or in the sanctuary as it has happened in the last 800 years. We have moved away from, it's more than 800 years. If you count the years from 825 up to now, when Europe was declared by Charles the Great a European continent. He was baptized on the 25th of December that year. And from that year, Europe was then declared a Christian continent. Which is also why, until the early 1400s, there was no European art in the Christian faith. All art was Afro-Asian. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that when we read the Bible, we need to locate it within our real material experiences. We're talking about save the boy child today, because the boy child is not metaphorically or figuratively, but materially threatened. Materially threatened. And when men are threatened, you must know the whole nation is threatened. Because the future, God is a strange God. The future of a nation, the future of a nation rests in the biology of the males. They are the seed carriers. All of us here have a surname attached to a man. You might be using your mother's surname, but she got her surname from her father. If her mother got it from her mother, going back, you'll discover there's a man behind that surname. All of us here carry male surnames. We carry the past. We also carry the future. And whilst we are ourselves the future. There's never a time when we are just one entity. The past is with you, the present is here, the future is also with you. Because human life is mobile. Nations are mobile. That's why there's mobility in this chapter. For instance, the very first verse, which we'll discuss tomorrow, says, "Now these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. They came each one with the household." The book of Exodus, the book of going out. Book of going out. Tomorrow we'll be talking about one of the major functions of manhood, that of taking their families to the future. That's the major function of a man. To be sure that his family goes into the future with him. The Israelites stay in Egypt for some years. We're not told at this time in the book of Exodus how long they stayed. And at that time, they lived under a government ruled by people, run by people who were their ancestral relatives. The Hyksos were Asians, just like the Hebrews. But in the course of time, the Hyksos were overthrown by another nation, the Pharaonic people. And in time, they noticed that the Israelites are increasing in number. And the new Pharaoh, the new king, decides we have to work out a plan to avert disaster. We might be overthrown in the event of a war. Verse 8 reads, "Now a new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph." In life, such things happen. Such things happen. And that's why you must never overrate yourself in history. Because at some point in your life, you might disappear into significance in the memory of a people. Some of you know what happens when a new boss comes into your job situation. He might treat you differently from the one who was there before. We all go through these changes in life. There will always be a time in your life when someone will not know you. He then said to the people, "Behold, the people of the sons of Israel are more and mightier than us. So we need to create a plan. And of course, the plan one was, let's give them hard work so that it can crush them. He was mistaken. It made them strong. I once heard T.D. Jakes say, pressure builds power. And they began to fear the Israelites more. They added more work. Perhaps they were engaged in what is called in South Africa extended public works. They increased the load, the ration of work. Until the formula failed. Then the king decided, let me work from within. Let's kill them from within. Let's use some of them to fight the battle for us. And let's go to the root of this problem. Kill the male children. Kill the male children. What were the reasons? What were the reasons? I've got this in my notes. He wanted to ensure in the future that intra-Hebraic matrimony does not take place. It was these families that were consolidating the nation. Look at the scenario in which old men are dead, and the little boys are being murdered. What will their future? In 10, 15, 20 years' time, there would be no male Jew or Hebrew. So the Israelites women would be forced to marry the local people, the Egyptians. Number one, they would be genetically compromised, the new generation. Number two, the language would disappear. Ultimately, there would be no Israelite. It was a policy of extermination. It was a policy of extermination. And the king wanted to use fellow Jews because people would react if a non-Jew walks into a bedroom where the woman is delivering. Why is she here? So he decides, let's get some of their senior women to flush the kids out. He had miscalculated because he did not know what Israel meant, their name. That these people were a nation of a promise, a covenant, which begins with Abraham in Genesis 12. He thought these are just ordinary citizens of Egypt. All of us as nations and as communities face threats of extinction sometimes. The threat might not be physical, it might be social, it might be spiritual, it might be material, it might even be financial. All of us are ever faced by the threat of extinction. In this case, these people were to be liquidated as a nation. I want to go back a little and deal with one of the reasons why we have to save the boy child. African males in South Africa have gone through a very rough time in the last 300 years. They've faced three major challenges. The first one was that they had to engage in wars of dispossession, resist the dispossession that came with colonization. War compromises people's psyches. War compromises people's lifestyles. War compromises people's physical and economic welfare. People had to learn tricks to con the enemy. That was the first major challenge that faced African manhood in this country. The next one was industrialization. Suddenly, men had to leave their homes in large numbers to work for people they did not belong to ethnologically. And they had to go there without their families. Discovery of diamonds, discovery of gold, the growth of cities led to the fracturing of the African family through absentee manhood. It's a long story. We should have talked about these things. We should have talked about Save the Boy Child many years ago. Because we're standing at the end of the disaster now, trying to salvage a ship that has long gone into the floor of the sea. And in doing this, I'm inviting ladies to understand what has happened to manhood, African manhood. Industrialization led to men staying away from their families for months, sometimes for years. And then it created a side effect. Men had to redefine themselves as sexual creatures. And then they underwent decay in the process. They had, because their wives are not around. Remember, African societies are centered around fertility. All third world cultures are centered around fertility. These are all things we need to know. Because fertility is something that helps you define your presence in history. That's how we look at it. If there's no child in a family, there's a sense of we've come to the end. You get the point? Yeah. We aren't like other national groups. Which is also one of the reasons why, sadly, HIV/AIDS is not about to end in Africa. We need a cultural key to unlock it, not a medical key. We're not going to solve it with medicine. We need a culture that says you don't need to have a child in order to validate your humanity. It's worse now because we pay those who get kids. The policy had very humane motivation, but its operation has resulted into very rugged results. And it has gone into overdrive. It has gone into overdrive. Did you know that between 1920 and 1940, in Gauteng, particularly in the central Greater Johannesburg region, for every 1,000 black males, there were 40 females. For every 1,000 black men in the Greater Johannesburg region, between 1920 and 1940, there were 40 females, because women are not allowed to work in the cities. And between 1916 and 1920, a law was made to bar industrialists or commercialists or owners of business from giving men what was defined as family salaries, so that their wives and kids could stay in the country and overcome here. That is why most women who came to the cities during those years made a life by prostitution or running ship-ins. The typical example is what you find in the book, Cry the Beloved Country. It is not something that Alan Paton created. He was reflecting on a real situation. Talk to your fathers and mothers. They'll tell you that the first persons who worked for white people in this country were men. And not women are recent as functionaries in other women's kitchens. They're a recent phenomenon. Men died in the mines. They died away from their homes. Some had to fight battles that were completely unnecessary. Others were attacked by animals as they moved from wherever they moved to these cities. But there's a third enemy of manhood that continues to ravage African manhood. I don't know what we can do about this one. This is the prison system. There is no prison in African society. We don't even have language names for a prison. Give me an African name for a prison. Prison has compounded the problem. In African society, there were 3 or 4 ways of punishing wrong. Number 1, we would give you a warning, would scold you, would give you a warning. Number 2, you would be fined. Number 3, your family would be asked to leave the area, you'd be exiled. Number 4, if you were a witch, you'd be murdered. We did not imprison people. We did not keep men and women away from their families for months and years, perhaps even for life. Prison destroyed manhood. Prison destroyed manhood. And so you need to know that we are fighting an almost losing battle. There needs to be a radical change, not only in societies or groups like churches, but in the whole system of running humanity in this country. We need a government that will say, to hell with our history. We want to start from scratch. We need a trip that will be like we're walking on the bottom of the sea, with the hope that we will cross over without anybody's help, but with our intellectual resources. Because there needs to be a new ideological formula to sort out manhood in this country. All the formulas that we have will not work because they are not hitting at the root problem. What has died in this country is not money or material. It is persons. Colonization has destroyed persons. I wonder if you're aware of the fact that a lot of males are now failing to maintain good relationships with women post-1994. Why? Because the theory that we are now equal did not take care of the restoration of the males. We moved into the new dispensation fractured. But because men are not supposed to cry, we kept the pain. Suddenly we're making everybody cry now. Because we can no longer tolerate keeping the pain. We're sharing the pain. And the church needs to talk about this thing. The church needs to talk about this thing. Church needs to talk. I've been part of a project which called Heart Work. We have been servicing males in prisons the last 4 years. The program is a level 1 NQF, is an NQF level 1 program. It takes a prisoner 18 modules to finish the program. And we deal with the sociology of imprisonment, the psychology of imprisonment. We deal with loss. When you are imprisoned, you experience major loss. You lose time, you lose dignity, you lose self-esteem, you lose identity, you lose work, you lose money, you lose friends, you lose sensibility. Loss is a major crisis in prison. You lose the opportunity to move around the world. That is why the program we run as a church in prisons, which only talks into doctrine, does not heal the prisoner. It merely informs him about a new faith. He comes back with his homosexuality. With his sodomy. He sits here and we think the guy is right. No, he's not right. It's not right. We don't deal with those things. Human beings are primarily spiritual creatures. They are not material creatures. When you hurt a person, we are not hurting just the flesh. We are hurting the inner person, the inner being. That's why one of the things that men need to start doing in this church is to stop fighting, especially in the presence of women. Especially in the presence of women. No man wants to be fought at by another man in the presence of women. You need to know this, ladies. Even the most useless man can kill you under those circumstances. So we're faced by a threat at the physical, political, economic, ideological, religious, and cultural level. Unfortunately, even religion has not done us well. Because we have been made to assume roles for which we have not been prepared. There's this common belief that some of us are beginning to question, that men were designed to provide. Some of us in the Adventist church, in this union, are beginning to question that theory. Because work was given to both of them. When the Hebrew says, I'll make him a wife, it says, I'll make him an equal helper. It says so. Not just a wife. An equal helper. It does not say wife. It says equal helper. It is post-biblical writers who insert wife there. It is understood that this is a wife, but her function is to be a helper at an equal level. And if you trace the history of African people and all other traditional communities, all people worked to sustain their families. This idea that work is for men is new. It comes from colonization. All human beings must work. All human beings must work. Let's argue. Let me give you a rider. Let's argue that men are supposed to work or provide, and women should receive. Post the agrarian period, all genders have been subjected to the same type of education. How do men lead women when they've received the same type of education? Give me an answer. How do men suddenly become leaders? Because your gender is not leadership. Because you were never trained to be a man. You were born a male. It's not an achievement, it's your biological condition. That's why I often tell women, stop making a noise about virginity. You did not acquire it. You were born with it. It's not a diploma. You don't go to university to be a virgin. God is not interested in virginity. He's interested in purity. God is looking for people who are pure. Because you can be a virgin and have a corrupt mouth, corrupt brain. Don't pride yourself on your biology, because even a dog can be a virgin. There needs to be a rethink, serious. We need to stop being afraid of thinking new thoughts. It is our privilege and our right and our duty to do so. Don't parade what you did not acquire. Stop parading what you were given. It's not an achievement. So there needs to be a program. I was telling a friend of mine recently that the youth department needs to introduce a new program. Because it is clear the other one has functioned in the area of making us pay allegiance to the church, but it has not made us new beings. You get the point? Yeah. Because some of these programs are designed in countries where contexts such as the ones we have here don't exist. And it is our right to create a new curriculum, to restore ourselves. To restore ourselves. So some of you are youth leaders need to rethink what you are doing. You might be stamping on the same ground forever, thinking you are making forward motion. We need to master other things as well. We need a new curriculum in this church. Mostly because we now live in a global society. We're impacted by all sorts of forces. The church, in fact, has become a crossroads. All influences that are in the world today can be found in the church. All doctrines, wrong or right, ideologies can be found in the church. In fact, in this church in South Africa, church in South Africa, all political parties are represented. All of them. Including those you like and those you don't like. All of them are represented. So we are not in 1844. We're not in 1863. We are in 2017. We need to address the challenges of the church of this year. Nothing is static. Nothing is static. Let's finish the story. Let's finish the story. The midwives feared God and did not as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. Senior women have a divine duty to educate younger women to save children, especially the boy child. I asked the Kotema Church recently whether all so-called firstborn children are really firstborn children. Did you hear me? That child you call your firstborn, is he or she a real firstborn? Or is he or she the one who was allowed to live? I'm reading Exodus again. 13. Verse 1. Verse 2. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, sanctify to me every firstborn, the first offspring of every womb among the sons of. I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible. I think in the King James it says the first one that opens the womb. The Bible is not lost. It's not a book that is in junk status. No. It knows what God said. And it will tell you what God said exactly. So this whole issue of, let's save the boy child, goes deeper than protecting kids who are already born. Because you can't save a child unless you start before the child is born. And this whole thing then creates another discussion of how we should behave before we're married. We'll not go into that one. We'll not go into that one. Why need we save the boy child? Why do we need to save the boy child? Because males, you might think this one has something to do with women. No, this one has something to do with men. Males carry the child in their bodies. We can't be dropping these kids all over. And women, stop being receptacles for dead children. You've heard me. Many of us need reconversion. Because we've staked our lives on things that are superficial. You see, one of the problems I have with the Christian religion, Prapet, is that it has been captured by false knowledge systems. I was asking myself 2 years ago, what makes a Muslim a Muslim? What makes a Jew a Jew? They are born that way. But why is it difficult for Christians to be Christian? We are not born into the Christian faith because it is not a national faith. We have to be born again. And so the journey becomes long, Babu Tabi. The journey from here to perfection becomes very long. And unfortunately, on the way in this journey, Christianity has been captured by local isms like Eurocentrism. You get the point? Yeah, we need to confess that we did not get the Bible from its original writers. We got it through mediums who had also worked their way in through it and imposed their own interpretations and practices. So we have to cleanse it from a history of contamination and go for what God really said. Otherwise, we'll be redeemed. And my argument is simple. When you apply religion with a wrong knowledge system, it can't be perfect. We'll ever be sharpening this knife, but it will never be sharp. So we need as a church to de-link ourselves from certain things that we know are hampering our journey into the future. Otherwise, we're always going to be fixing broken manhood. And when men are broken, nations get broken as well. Look at how the devil has militarized manhood. All over the world, men are fighting. Fighting in army uniform and in suits. Yes, boardroom fights. This world is full of male history at loggerheads with society. So being church is not being one of the organizations around. We have to enter the church in order to be new beings. You also need to know from this chapter that evil people are always threatened by your success. So don't be surprised when the Pharaoh says, you see, these people might overcome us one day. Some of us are harassed by people who think we are better than them. Isn't that so? Because they are judging us on the basis of their needs, instead of judging us on the basis of what we also need. Don't think that my success is a threat to your success. It isn't. While we are one community, we are walking each one in his or her own track. Because the Christian religion requires individual accountability, not group accountability. This is one religion that requires you to be honest to the conscience you have, to the teachings you have. When God is your mainstay, that which your enemies use to destroy you becomes your blessing and platform for further development. What does the Bible say? No weapon formed against you shall prosper, isn't it? Why? Because God knows the plans he has for us. When God blesses you, enemies become incensed and more abusive and violent. So don't be surprised when the Egyptians of today harass you because you are busy growing from strength to strength. Every birth is an affirmation of the right of a community to live in the future. Every birth is the affirmation of the right of a community to live in the future. When you give birth to a child, you are saying, let the future happen. Children are the visible vehicles that transmit the beliefs and tradition of a nation to future generations. would not be here if our forefathers stopped giving birth in 1900. Would not be here. That's why God dealt well with the midwives. The Bible says then they multiplied and waxed very great. And because they did this, God found them houses. He made them houses. God made it possible for these midwives who were moving around, fixing beds, to have their own places of abode. God will bless you when you bless His people. There are rewards for doing good. There are rewards for doing good. We just need to appreciate how God has brought us from childhood to now. Don't take the next years of your life lightly. They depend on what you do now. There are no accidents in history. Every accident is caused by the fact that certain things collided wrongly, and then an accident happens. There's totally no accident in history. There's no chance. Which is why Carl Sandburg, an American scholar, made these words after assessing why and how civilization collapsed. He wrote the following statement: "For we know that when a nation or civilization disappears, when a society goes down and never comes back, one condition can always be found. They forgot from whence they came. They lost sight of what brought them along." Don't forget the messes God has given you in the past. They are the building blocks for future blessings. So we have a task here to defend manhood from the womb, through childhood, through youth. All of us, not just the women, but even men. Remember, you are the future in the present. God bless you.